Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. Before I get started, I have one really important thing to say. So I speak a tiny little bit of French, so I can, buy coffee or ask for directions. But I've been going to some of the talks here in French as well, and I just have to say that cybersecurity sounds so romantic in French that really I enjoyed my time, even though I didn't understand anything. It felt wonderful. So thank you so much for doing this. I'm really excited. And now we're going to talk about the cloud and about the fact that everyone's hackable. So a couple things about me. I'm Shira. I came all the way from Israel. I do cloud. I do security. I'm also a member of the local OSP Israel chapter. I'm co-leading that chapter. Yay! I also saw your booth over here. So it's great to see that we are active everywhere. And also, I'm a great supporter of women in technology and women in cybersecurity. Try to help underrepresented communities, doesn't matter which, to get into cybersecurity, because very often it looks like a very, male-dominant thing. Obviously, look around you, mostly men in the room, but we're trying to make a difference by helping more people to get into this field. So please support your co-workers, give them a hand, help them learn something new, and encourage them to be better at what they do. It will also help you to be better at what you do. We came here to talk about security, and this is kind of a diagram of what the good old data center looked like. Back in the days, it was really easy to do security in the on-prem days, because all you had to do was really to put some kind of device on your way out to the internet. It's called a firewall, and you felt really safe and really good about it. All the security products we used to have at that time had the word prevention in them. Data leakage prevention. You were actually able to prevent hacks from happening because you could control everything that was coming in and out of your data center. And these were very good and naive and happy days, but it's no longer happening that way. We don't know, we can't do security by prevention anymore, or it's not enough these days. Here's like a bunch of logos of companies you're aware of, you know of, you maybe use some of them. And the common ground of all of them is actually that in the last couple of years, all of them had data breaches. And as you probably know, these companies have really, really big security budgets, and they can hire any security professional they want and create any security strategy they want and need, and still it happened to them. Now, these are the companies that we know of. The companies who don't appear here even because they didn't have enough space on the slide. Some of the companies are unaware of the fact that they've been hacked. Some of them are being hacked as we speak. Some of them are hacked not for the sake of their data. Some of them are hacked because their competitors wants to know something, because they have to do something with critical infrastructure of their country, and some criminal or state-sponsored group wants to hack their infrastructure for a different reason. So a lot of companies are not here, but that doesn't mean that they were not hacked. Most likely they have been hacked, and they're just unaware of that these days. So as I said, prevention doesn't work anymore, and we need a new attitude when talking about cloud security. Today, when I talk to cloud security professional, this is what I feel like when I describe my day-to-day life and how I plan security in the cloud. Today, the average enterprise has between 70 and 80 different security solutions. Means that their security engineers need a lot of screens open at any given moment. They have a lot of outputs and a long queue of tickets they have to address. And even though they have so many security products, they still don't feel safe. They don't feel comfortable. They buy more products, and their CISO doesn't sleep well at night. So why do we keep on buying these products instead of just thinking about a different way to approach this problem? And now the cloud created us a new perimeter, some would say, but it definitely created a lot of new buzzwords that you're all aware of, like serverless and Kubernetes and containers. But I say that the cloud is not a new perimeter. The cloud created us a problem of no perimeter at all. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to show you a few examples of why we don't have a perimeter to protect anymore. We are losing it. It's really vague. It's really foggy. And there is no one simple way of protecting our cloud infrastructure. And before I dive in, I just want to remind you, if you're not using the cloud, about the shared responsibility model. So if in the past, when in the good old data center days, you had your IT manager who was in charge of IT in your organization, and if you wanted a new server, you had to be best friends with him, because it could take months until you place your order, and until it's coming in, and until it's installed. It's going to take months until you have that server that you wanted. And they were the kings of IT. You really needed their help in order to do something. Today, it all shifted towards the dev teams. They run their own infrastructure. Do they do security? I don't think so. Good job security for me, because they're just being really irresponsible about how they do security. They care less about security and more about delivering a new feature. So if in the past, the world of the software and the hardware were the part where it still belonged to the IT manager, today AWS is in charge of the bare metals of the data center. We don't care about them anymore. All I have to do is just click and decide what kind of asset do I want to spin, what kind of operating system do I want on it. And basically, that's it. It's that simple. But we still have a lot of responsibility about how we configure these assets. How do we allow and not allow them to communicate with the world? Sometimes we forget that. We just choose the default security configuration coming with AWS or Azure, or whichever cloud vendor you prefer. And yes, it creates a lot of problems to us. Let's talk about one of them, identity and access management. This is our way of giving other users, other vendors, other third parties, a way to get data or get resources out of our AWS account. It's really good and it's really helpful, but unfortunately, a lot of people do mistakes in their IAM. Here is just one example of users leaving API keys in GitHub. Sometimes we have reasons to leave credentials in our code because we need to for specific reasons, but these credentials should only give access to very, very, very specific resources according to what your application needs. It should definitely not be credentials to your AWS account, but these things happen. Then I talk to users about it, and they go to their GitHub and they change the code and they remove the hard-coded credentials, but they forget that this is a repository and I have older versions of your code. So I still have access to some of your resources which you did not want to give other people access to. So please don't forget to change older versions as well. Other things that we have seen is hard coding credentials again in mobile apps. And in this example, we had developers leaving credentials that gave access to users' data. So you think that people don't make these kind of mistakes, but they do. So this is something you really need to pay attention to. Let's talk about storage services. So in AWS, we all know the S3 buckets. And if you log into Shodan right now, you're gonna see a few dozens of S3 buckets logged to the internet with a public IP address, and you can easily see what kind of data they store. But there are plenty of other storage services in AWS or in Azure Blob, or whichever security vendor you choose, whichever cloud vendor you choose. And these mistakes still happen. In Amazon, for example, in Amazon, in this example, we had Sorry, I forgot what did I want to say about this one. But in Facebook, they also used a third party in Mexico who lost data of 400 million users, which probably means that they have some of our data over there. So users very often make mistakes. The data I wanted to talk about before, the example was users on their EBS leaving keys, which they forgot about, enabling other users to just log into their AWS account very, very easily with no problem at all. Let's talk about compute power, which is also something very, very exploitable in the cloud. We see a deny of wallet attacks, means someone is just using your cloud to do whatever they want and you're paying the bill. One of the examples is, of course, crypto mining, which again, you're paying the bill and the hacker is taking the Bitcoin or whatever to their own pocket. In the last couple of years, we saw less ransomware attacks because it required, some interaction between the attacker and the account owner. So in this example, there is no really communication required. I can just install or spin up some really high GPU assets, mine my own Bitcoin, mine my own business, and someone else is going to pay the bill. And if they don't pay attention to their AWS bill, they're not going to know that someone is abusing their account. Of course, this is also useful for proxy attacks. So I just want to use someone else's infrastructure to hack someone else and make it look like I had nothing to do with it. So again, using someone else's compute power is very good for that. We saw one interesting example with Tesla, who had a Kubernetes cluster spinned up, but they forgot to put a password on their console. So someone was able to get access to one of their containers. The container had credentials to other AWS accounts of Tesla, and the hacker was able to mine lots of cryptocurrency that way. Another good example and very important one is using packages that are found online. It's really good and easy. It's also a headache to update them afterwards. Maybe it requires some refactoring. So in one case, we just saw a Node.js package that in addition to what it was supposed to be doing, it was also looking for wallets and just stole the coins that were in those wallets. This is what the code was doing additionally, of course. And then we recently saw a malware called Xboomer, who is just using AWS infrastructure in a no need to download kind of malware. So yeah, it's happening all the time. It's very easy. Now I'd like to talk about a real example that actually happened recently to a bank, an American bank called Capital One. Capital One has a very, very strong cloud security team. So again, it's just another one of those examples where it's not some esoteric small organization who didn't have the resources to protect their cloud. They had a very, very strong team to do that. And still, unfortunately, it happened to them as well. So let's talk about the stuff that we know. What was the damage that was caused? So first of all, user data of 100 million users or potential customers, because it also hurt users who just asked for credit from the bank, even though they were denied. So their social security numbers, names, addresses, emails, and so on, everything was leaked. They had more victims, about 30 others, including Europeans, Ford, the car manufacturer, universities. So a lot of other companies that were hurt, and crypto mining as well. Let's not neglect that easy money option. So in addition to stealing the money, the hacker also installed some crypto mining machines on that account. So let's try to go over the steps as we understand them to how this attack actually happened. Of course, we don't have all the information about how it happened. There is some information available online, and some of it we just had to kind of guess how would we do it ourselves if we were the hackers. So it started with a scanner that was looking for web servers that were vulnerable to SSRF attacks. SSRF is a server-side request forgery. It means that I can, in a certain way, it depends on the web server, I can get to the backend server and make requests that I actually told them to do. So in this case, the hacker found a bunch of web servers that, again, were vulnerable in the application layer to this kind of attack, and was able to create requests using that backend server. In this example, the hacker made requests to the metadata server service. In AWS, there is a metadata service for every asset. It means that all the actions and all the information about that asset live in that server, and you can actually make requests like, show me what kind of credentials do we have, or tell me the last action that was taken on the server, and so on. And this attack shows very good understanding of how AWS works and how it can be exploited. So the metadata service. In this case, the hacker was able to ask for tokens. Now, it's really small, so you can't see, but I'm going to show you a video in a couple of minutes. We created a fake web page just to try how this attack is going to work. And we made a request to the metadata server. It looks really small, but you can see the IP address. It's always the same IP address for the metadata server because it's an internal IP address. And then you can see in the URL, it says metadata. And then underneath, you can see all the stuff you can ask from the metadata service. So you can ask for credentials, you can ask for IAM, you can ask for IP addresses, and so on. Everything just appears here. So the next phase was obviously to ask for credentials. And you can see on the top, security credentials. And we named our credentials bedroll wide S3 access. This was our role. And we were able to ask for a token with this kind of credentials. So all you have to write in the URL is security credentials. And this is a token. This is a real token that you just copy paste and use for whatever you want to do. And so now we have a token and we have access to the AWS account. So all we have to do is list all the S3 buckets as the hacker did, and then sync them. It means that we download everything that the hacker had, that the S3 bucket has, to the hacker's computer. It's really that simple. And of course, don't forget to install your miners just in case. So this is what happened in this hack. And could this have been prevented? Or what should you be doing to prevent this kind of attack? So first of all, you need to know the roles that you have in your account. Because in this example, a web server had a role with access to all the S3 buckets of the account, instead of just having access to the bucket that had the JavaScript code and the images that the web server needed. So know what kind of roles you have, and obviously don't give too broad permissions if it's unnecessary. The least privilege principle, of course, don't give to users or machines access they don't need to areas in your application they don't need. It goes the same for users who don't need access to the production environment or to specific databases in your production environment. Monitor who is running commands and where they do it from. One of the things we noticed while doing this research was that, first of all, the hacker was using Tor. And, you know, Tor has the nodes available online. So this is you can kind of hold the updated list of Tor nodes and notice when someone is using Tor when they try to access your application. You might want to allow it, you might not. And you might want to say that, okay, using Tor by itself is not a bad thing, but if I see someone trying to access our AWS account from a Tor IP address, then this is weird because my DevOps engineers are not using Tor, or I don't expect to see any token creation with a Tor IP address. So this is something you can very, very easily identify and prevent any further malicious activity in your account. And this is what the log of this activity looked like. It's a real AWS log from CloudTrail. And in this case, we were able to see that where you see I and 01C, this is the name of the machine that the hacker was trying to get to. Of course, this is just a simulation that we created. It's not a real log from the real hack. But we see some kind of weird string coming before, and it means that someone is trying to assume that role. It's not the real machine trying to make that action. It's someone else assuming the role of that machine. So again, you have all the data in your logs. You just need to know what you're looking for. And as you can see, I talked about the bad role with YS3 access. You can see that this is the role that was used in this activity. And then the log is very big, so I just split it to two parts. So in this part, I can see the IP address that the hacker was trying to work from. And then I see that it was using Kali. Again, you need to know your developers, and I assume most of them are not using Kali for no real reason. And I see that there was the CLI activity, AWS CLI, and I don't think that most of you are using Kali to make CLI actions with your AWS account. So again, this data is in your AWS logs. So it's very easy to create a rule asking to see any action that was made with the CLI, with Kali, and to monitor that either these actions don't happen or that you're well aware if they do, and you go ask that user, what the hell are you doing? So very, very easily detectable. Now I will show you a short, let's see if the video is going to work. This is our simulation of how the attack happened. This is us showing that we have no access to an S3 bucket. We try to log in and we have no access to it, just proving that we are not cheating in this demo. And then we went to the app where I showed you screenshots before. And you can just, it's kind of a webhook that shows what kind of answers we can get from it. And now we go to the metadata service, and we see all the things we can ask from this service. So we're going to go for IAM. And we have the bedroll credentials over here. So we ask for them, and we're going to get the tokens of the bedroll. This is the token. It has a time to live. We copy paste it, and we go to our Kali machine to use it. We just wrote a short script to, kind of create the token to be useful for us. We didn't manipulate it in any way. We just put it in a TXT file. And we're going to run it. And we're going to go to the S3 bucket, and we see that we have access to all the buckets, and we have a sensitive bucket of data. So obviously it's going to be the first one we try to get to. Now we try with credentials. and we have a secret.txt file. So this is how we did it. And it's something that all of you can do at home in your AWS account, of course. Now, before coming to this conference, I was told that, listen, since this conference is in Canada, how about if you talk about an incident that happened in Canada? So I was like, okay, let's see what happened in Canada. And I heard about a bank called Desjardins. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Originally from Quebec, and actually one of the biggest financial institutes in North America. So it's a pretty big bank. And just in June, we heard that it was hacked and that data of 2.8 million people was stolen. And also about 173,000 businesses were affected by it. And now we see this number, 2.8 million, and it looks nothing compared to the 100 million in the US, but I think that it's almost 10% of the Canadian citizens or something like this. So here this number means a lot. And once again, social security numbers, names, addresses, and so on were stolen by this hacker that acted completely differently from the hacker that we saw in the Capital One incident. What happened here? So as I said before, this was publicly published in June of 2019, but the whole thing actually started in December of 2018, when the bank notices unusual transactions. Now, I couldn't find information about what kind of unusual transactions were detected, but they were unusual enough so that the bank would approach the police and ask this to be investigated. And it was investigated. 6 months later, May of 2019, the police notifies the bank that some of their customers' data was found in the wild. So it means that the data was already exfiltrated and the hacker was maybe trying to sell it or just to spread it around. And then we all heard about it in June. So this means that it took the bank a very, very, very long time to notify its users that something bad is going on here. And this is actually a question for people from the bank, like, why would you notify your users that late? Why didn't you ask them to rotate passwords before? It means they put a lot of people at risk for a very long time. Now, we don't know exactly how this thing happened, but in this case, there was probably very good social engineering because that employee, the hacker, was actually an employee of the bank until he was fired because of what he did. So he gained the trust of his fellow coworkers, and for some reason, they gave him their permissions. And then he was using everyone's and his permissions to steal data and exfiltrate it. And actually, the police found out that he was involved with different crime groups trying to sell this data too, including street gangs and also international syndicates. So he was really trying from every direction to sell this data. And this is probably how the police found out about it and about the data that was exfiltrated. So to sum up what we talked about today, if the best ones are hackable, it means that all of us are, no matter how hard we try, no matter how many security products we buy, no matter how many people we hire on our security team, we are all hackable. At some point, it's going to happen to us, and we have to be prepared and to have a good reaction plan to detect it as fast as possible. The detection and contamination time is too long today. Recently, IBM published their cost of data breach survey and said that on average, it takes 279 days to detect and contaminate a data breach. So this is almost a year. It's a very, very, very long time for damage to be created. You don't want to wait 6 months before you notify your users. You want to detect it as soon as the token is stolen from your web server. Then you cancel the token, and then you understand how it was even stolen from your web server. You do not wait until the S3 buckets are listed and all the data is stolen from them. Faster detection can save you from very, very massive damage. And don't forget that. And use your logs like the CloudTrail I showed you before to detect faster unusual events. It's not that hard. You don't need fancy machine learning algorithms. I showed you the log. The data is there. The role is there. You can see that an unusual IP address is using a role that is very, very wide. You can very easily see that, and you don't need these really fancy products. How are you going to detect? So log. I showed you the CloudTrail. You have the flow logs. You have many other logs that your security products and your IT is providing. So keep them in a place where they're accessible to you. Don't just dump them in an S3 bucket and forget about them, because in the day you will need them, it will be very hard to extract them and then use them again. Look for anomalies. As I mentioned before, it's really easy. You don't need the really fancy algorithms. You know who your users are. You know usually at what times they work. And you know for each user pretty much what roles do they need. So if one day they request for a broad role, you're going to know that, yeah, maybe someone is working from home on a new project, but also maybe someone is using that user's credentials. Priorities. It's very hard. All of these products create a lot of tickets for us to handle. And you need to prioritize. As security professionals, you know that the tokens are very important to handle, and we don't want them to be abused. I'm not saying that patching machines is not important. It's also very important. But my guess is that each and every one of you has dozens of machines with hundreds of patches needs to be installed. So prioritize, don't neglect that, but we need to decide according to each organization what is more dangerous to you. And the last thing is automate response if possible. The credentials example that I mentioned, yes, if you will create a rule that if someone is requesting for a token using a Tor node, you will stop the session, I don't think it will create a damage to your production environment. So I think it's okay to create an automation that if this happens, delete this token, or do something like invoke this user, or do something like that. You can automate the really dangerous activities that are happening in your account, because I expect that they happen very rarely. You can also automate the things that happen 20 times a day, and you also always respond in the same way. This is also very easy to automate, and this will save you a lot of time and leave you enough time to handle the really serious and unusual events that happen in your account. That's it. Thank you very much. It was my pleasure to be here. And I think we have time for questions, so I can take them here or outside.